the think tank Progress Ireland aims to sort of inform or create like a revolutionary is a poor word for it, a radical rethink of how to fix Ireland's primary problems, housing, the rest of it, productivity, all of this kind of stuff. That's how it markets itself, but I think it's flawed, obviously, and I want to get into that. It's funny, and I wish it were a little bit better, let's say, because it's you think perhaps a billionaires could come along with this sort of new thinking, fund, bright upstarts who have all these kind of interesting ideas, maybe conflicting ideas, and this sort of swirling cauldron of new thinking to dispense with the Gombeanism, the corruption, the inefficiencies, all of that, and actually try to create a more livable, modern Ireland that feels like it's getting better as opposed to getting worse, I suppose, from all people's perspectives, whether you're rich or poor. I think even billionaires like these guys can see that there's an overall sense of Ireland is in decline. A lot of Western countries are, and they want to use their sort of technological problem-solving skills, or at least not their own skills, because they're not actually working for the think tank, but they want to support people with a mindset that they respect to come up with the bright ideas, right? Think tank. That's what a think tank is. And I mean, I don't have much background on these guys. They were some of the youngest self-starting billionaires in the world, maybe ever, but definitely in the world, as in not in nepotism. They founded Stripe. They were funded originally, got investment from the Teal sort of network, the PayPal mafia and all of that, and sort of, let's say, revolutionized the payment systems and the rest of that. And now they're multimillionaires. So that's that. I'll get into it. Like I said at the beginning, to me, this stuff is interesting. I don't know about you. I'm always thinking about how, I think a lot of us do think about how could we just make this country better? There's so many things that run really stupidly. If only the old heads, these sort of corrupt politicians and, dated ideas and things that are stuck in the past and stuck in with this kind of the inertia of just the past. If only we could just kind of fix these things, common sense solutions and all of that. I like to think about stuff like that. And so when these projects come along and announce themselves as having the answers, of course, others do too. Sinn Féin, for example, recently launched a manifesto on housing in Ireland. I find that, so I was going to stream on that too. I just find that stuff interesting. So anyway, without any further ado, I'll just kind of get into it and read through it, some of the stuff. So policy, just to give you more detail, this is from the Business Post today. Oh, and by the way, just FYI, maybe to spice it up a bit, give you a bit more intrigue. I have been following this for like the last year because I know who these people are connected to, other people who are connected to other people who are sort of connected to like right-wing nationalist politics in Ireland. And I find I've known that from day one. It's kind of been obvious. And I found that kind of interesting. So I was waiting for them to actually launch the think tank and find out who's going to be running it. They announced that a few months ago. Sean Keyes, author, economist type of guy, writes for The Currency. So I found all this very interesting for sort of, insider reasons, because like, I all of these, like take for example, Sean Keyes was speaking to Peter Ryan. If you know Peter Ryan, he's Irish American, very interesting, knows a lot about Irish history, economic policy, sort of Listian economics, and loves the South Korean development model and all this kind of stuff. All very interesting, and I'm a big admirer of Peter Ryan's. But he spoke to Sean Keyes in an interview at some point. So, that's just one example of a connection. Not that I'm not trying to associate myself necessarily with any of these people, but I would admire Peter Ryan, and then he's talking to Sean Keyes, and Sean Keyes now is running this think tank for these lads, and so just on that basis alone, it's more interesting than the average, I don't know, IBEC conference or whatever. To me, it's that bit more interesting. So I've been following and I've been waiting to see where they go with this. I thought maybe they would take this approach of like trying to dress it up as radical and touches of sort of right wing stuff, like Elon Musk energy to it, something like that. But they haven't. So, just from the Business Post today, briefly, a new Ireland-focused think tank backed by the Collison brothers has launched with a policy on infrastructure and innovation. It's on a mission to connect Ireland to best-in-class data-driven policy from around the world. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so let's just go to their website. They launched it, right? So you get into it and you see ideas to unlock Ireland's potential, policies to help build a better Ireland, housing, infrastructure, innovation. Sean Keyes has an article to reach its potential. Ireland must face outwards. How to do the Metrolink better. How to support R&D basically in Ireland. And one of the good ideas I like is supporting Indigenous business, sort of weaning off the reliance on multinationals a little bit and having more native businesses and more in the way of engineering and other tech and industry to so that we're doing it ourselves. It's not just all Irish. It's not just all human capital traveling through Ireland for multinationals and for the capital to fly out. That's a good idea, right? And of course, if they're discussing like logical ideas about infrastructure and all that, it's going to make sense here and there. You obviously know where my criticism is going. The big question is, well, what would they say about immigration? What would they say about society, social policy? That's not what they purport themselves to be. They don't purport themselves to be a social or political sort of think tank, I suppose. But I would say, purely on a tech bro logical problem solving basis, you obviously have to consider that, right? The population increase, what's going on with that, the demand. It's just a technical aspect of society that is, of course, very important. So my question originally would have been, are they going to like delve into it or maybe give a nod and a wink to it in some way, or are they going to sidestep it and ignore it? We'll get into that in a second. So just some more context. We have today Michael McDowell. He goes to their launch. Just, I'm sort of giving you a general idea of the little connections to what might be called right-wing conservative nationalist circles in Ireland. There is this sort of strange link there. And I don't mean to sound like a conspiracist or something. I'm just giving, there's no black and white sort of smoking gun evidence or something like that, or pact between people sitting in a room plotting or whatever. It's just that there is an interesting link there. And so we have the head of this Progress Ireland, Keyes, meeting with, or not meeting with, just kind of taking a photo with Michael McDowell. Michael McDowell goes along, of course, noted sort of, let's say, regime, inner party critic of liberal excesses in Ireland for decades now. He's came and went in a few occasions, and he kind of reared his head again in the last year, opposing the worst excesses of and abuses of asylum migration as a form effectively of economic migration and the rest of it. He popped up to oppose the proposed referenda from the government on the role of women, definition of women, and all that happened a few months ago. So yeah, he's this kind of seen as this right-wing figure, and he's at this. It's just notable. It's just speaks to my point. And then there's this other thing, and I'm not even throwing shade at people here. Like, this is just observations and critique or whatever. I don't really know any of these people, but I'm not on a screed against anyone or anything like that. And there's this thing called era accelerationism, right? And you see it around it sort of, I suppose this is something you sort of have to take my word for a little bit. But if you pay attention to this online, you'll know that, there are there is even the word accelerationism. I even saw on Reddit that some Redditors were criticizing it as it has connotations of radical fringe politics, nationalist politics, effectively. Accelerationism, and that sort of account uses a lot of memes and that sort of meme energy. Whoa, Jack, let's fucking go. Are we back? That kind of like cultural energy of right wing online dissent or something like that, right? So, that's another thing that when I discovered it, I thought this could be interesting. Originally, I thought air accelerationism, that's pretty cool. And it's got a foothold in the mainstream. It's not totally blackballed itself by being crazy radical. These people are, whoever this person is, that's kind of interesting. I would keep quiet on that and not try to drag them down. I would even, rub shoulders with someone who rubs shoulders with this or that person and keep it kind of classy. And again, I'm only speculating on these associations. I'm not trying to impugn this person at all. I don't know who they necessarily associate with. But what I'm saying is, on the other hand, it seems that there's a sort of a link and a big sort of crossover, let's say, between the likes of this and the likes of Sean Keyes, the likes of Progress Ireland now or whatever, which then goes back to the Collison brothers, of course, because they're funding Progress Ireland, right? But what I'm trying to get at is that this whole world to me is interesting. They're not all formally linked. People who I know who are cool and very interesting thinkers in the sort of nationalist scene in Ireland aren't formally linked to air accelerationism, and air accelerationism isn't formally linked to Progress Ireland, etc., etc. These are just sort of loose crossovers that I notice, a little bit of rubbing shoulders, intersecting circles here and there. And so that's why it's interesting to me. Now, the accelerationism thing, what I thought maybe would be the classic conservative politicking where behind the scenes people are cool, they know what's up, they know what's real. But when they go to, book events or something like that, they have to kind of play it cool a little bit, but they still give nods here and there. And so I just thought that could be positive. I'd be willing to be a friendly supporter of that kind of stuff if it like had little nods to controlling population, but we also need more rail links, spoken wheel links, and all this kind of stuff, like these big ideas about technological solutions to problems or whatever. Yeah, I was just interested in this hybrid. Maybe basically you'll have this tech bro solutions based ideology that sort of holds the door open a bit for nationalist sentiment, nationalist ideas, and maybe gets energy from it, but also gives nods and winks to it. I don't know, something like that. I thought it would be interesting. But what I found is that, from what I can see, whether you're talking about air accelerationism or Progress Ireland, to me the whole thing lacks substance. In reality, it might have a few novel ideas about technical solutions to problems or whatever, but that's whatever, to be honest. Like, things that are reasonably obvious, that like things that are done badly in any given territory or administration that could be done better, something to do with funding research or this or that. I mean, these things are what they are. These are technocratic, borderline dull technocratic remedies to problems that you could debate back and forth. Fair enough. But you could get that with the IDA. You could get Neil Richmond who says we need to build, or whatever, stuff like that. But to me, obviously, that's not radical. That's not accelerationism. That's not let's fucking go energy. That's not any of that. And I find myself looking through whether any of these things. I find myself looking through and trying to figure out, well, where is the radical and interesting reform, this bringing in of dangerous ideas from all directions, and sort of finding synthesis and creating a futuristic sort of path that we could go down, to take elements of the past into the future, all of that, right? To make Ireland a better place. Not a nationalist ideologue sort of a fever dream where it's like an autarky or sort of a, a bunch of thatched cottages, an autarky, something like that. It doesn't have to be that. It can accept that we're in a globalized world. Um, certain things are what they are. We have multinationals, we have this, we have that, but also we need to get a hold on society a little bit better. Almost more along the lines of borderline something that you might hear Elon Musk say, even. And you don't see that. I follow, with respect, I follow the air accelerationism stuff, and I follow the Progress Ireland, and all I see is like something that you would find fall out of Johnny Ronan's back pocket, or even the Collison brothers, or borderline just Mary Lou McDonald or Neil Richmond, or you name it. It just, I don't know. And I'm looking for the substance. I'm looking for the interesting bit. And then, of course, they, like, for example, this accelerationism thing. They did a little thing at the Dalkey Book Festival, which, okay, I don't know how David McWilliams let you in. Maybe, okay, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the accelerationism word is throwing me. Maybe it's just a word. Fair enough. But I still think, well, this could be cool. And I know people who are sort of rocking these circles a little bit. Where is the bit? Where's the juicy bit? Where's the even vaguely juicy bit? And I just can't find it. To me, it just seems like all aesthetic and no substance in terms of that. In terms of that sort of suggestion of a radical energy, it's all suggestion and no substance, as far as I can tell. And then you see the guests. You can look into those. But like more or less all in agreement on the fundamentals of, we'll say, well, obviously progress, the idea of material progress at all, like to the abandonment of all human, social, national, or biological even processes, just agglomeration economics, stuff like that. And my argument, it's like I'm going off on this stuff. This is the kind of stuff that interests me at the end of the day, because it's the argument you're making with, basically, it's like the final boss, I think, is arguing with the concept of technocracy and progress, so-called, that informs the Western policies of sort of cracking down on people opposing it, let's say in England, and just bringing in millions of people into a country with no regard to how human beings, even and mammals, work, just, and thinking that is smart and that is solutions based and that is clever. I think all of that is just a big load of window dressing for very rich people to just make more profit and have more power effectively. That's my view. But what I was going to say is that even within the framework of technocracy, I believe that there should be a role for your nationalist, your leftist, whatever, a few different people like that who come from a more human-centered point of view. Like a leftist, they believe that there should be justice and fairness for people and all of that, certain amount of equity and all that. And nationalists believe in people, kin, conservative values, religion, etc. And that those things are actually not obscure. Those things are not ethereal. They are very real. They're as real as discussions about land, about engineering, about technological advancement. These are, because of course things are still operated by humans. It's important that the society that undergirds even your material technocracy, from your own point of view, it's important that that society has stability. And that stability cannot just come from a kind of pepper spray. It actually has to come ultimately, because that only, of course, heightens polarization and tension and uncertainty. So, you need an actual society, a coherent society undergirding all of this. If you want to talk about infrastructure and technological advancement, you need an actual society that has some form of stability and longevity built into it. And that's what you would call culture, family, nation, all of that stuff. That stuff is important. And so I just find it thoroughly uninteresting when I see technocrats sort of discussing like, oh, look at our based train system, look at our based Singaporean model, or this kind of stuff, when it's like, well, yeah, but you kind of have to at some point give a nod to the idea that you're probably every year for the last 3 years, in my estimation, there have probably been 200 odd thousand, close to 200,000 immigrants coming into Ireland in the most bizarre way possible as well. A country of a few million, that's completely insane. And the society can't hold up under that socially and biologically, but the infrastructure also can't keep up with that. No matter what sort of model you take from Dubai or whatever, no matter what you do, you're not getting on top of that without halting the immigration situation or reevaluating it. And to do that, then you would need to adjust your whole economic model to fit with that. And so it's a fundamental question of how society works, how the economy works, how progress itself works, and all of that. And to me, the fact that that's sort of being ignored for those multiple reasons, basically from my perspective and from their own perspective, renders the whole thing kind of moot, uninteresting, and uninspiring, in my view. I'm just going to check some chat here to keep myself entertained because I'm sick of talking to myself here. I always go to last through Gale, favoritism here, sorry. Says another point with the tech stuff. The tech stuff is sucking in intelligent people and leaving other areas, public sector, for example, abandoned as a result. Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, and in Ireland, the tech stuff sucking in intelligent people who work for foreign multinationals who basically they create value, ultimately capital kind of value that just leaks out of the country, goes back to America or whatever. So this, to me, this is the fundamental question. I wrote a essay on oh, by the way, I never mentioned at the start, link in the description on YouTube and in the bio if you're watching on Twitter. Follow me on YouTube, Twitter, Telegram, Rumble as well, perhaps. And if you can throw something my way if you enjoy the streams, and if you can't, don't. But so that's the plug there, and you can super chat as well if you like. No pressure. So yeah, I wrote this China essay. I know I always mention that if you're familiar with me. I wrote that for a very sort of important reason. To me, that essay it's not some kind of masterpiece, but to me, it's really important. I don't know. I could almost write an essay on why the essay is important in a sense, because it's more. It seemed like it was an essay about China not doing immigration, and that was my point. But what it really was is the immigration being a proxy for everything, really, in a sense. The idea that a society has to just grow infinitely to survive, to thrive. You'd be impoverished and poor and broken down and weak and uncompetitive if you don't have this constantly growing economy, given that birth rates are declining just worldwide. So that's the fundamental question, not only of China or America or Europeans or anything else, but it's a fundamental question of human existence, right? In a way, at least for the next 100+ years. Are you just going to hoover up people from the higher fertility parts of the world, i.e. Africa, to boost your sort of numbers, to hold this kind of pyramid scheme up? Or are you going to sort of walk away from the blackjack table a little bit? Are you going to just say, okay, do you know what? I'm not going to play this game. It's very risky. It's pretty crazy. And it could sort of make me some money in the immediate, perhaps, debatably. But the whole thing is too volatile. So do you know what? I'm just leaving the building. And it's very important that China, notably, just in the last 2 or 3 years, it was long predicted that at some point their population would go into decline, like numerically in an absolute sense, and it did in the last few years. And Western economists have been crying sort of doomsday for them, and China aren't responding. They haven't done mass immigration. There's no indication that they are going to do it. And my argument was that they actually have a very developed country. Despite every year they say there's going to be a new Evergrande, China's always about to collapse. It doesn't necessarily, and it won't, of course. It'll have economic ups and downs, but ultimately it'll stumble along just fine, right? And they have plenty of human capital. Their population could halve, and they would still have human capital. They would figure out the age dependency thing either with technology or a slight adjustment in social practices, how people live, and all that. These things would solve themselves. But if you import, 10 million Africans to your country and 10 million Indians into a small island nation or whatever, that's not only would you lose what you formerly knew as the nation in terms of Ireland, Irishness, Ireland, but even the whatever you call this new country basically would be unstable. It would be like, to be honest, like Pakistan or India or something, just rife with conflict based on, or perhaps some Middle Eastern country, Sykes-Picot kind of stuff, like a country that's doomed really in a sense because it just it's not actually a nation state really. But anyway, sorry, I'm sort of going off on that. But the point about China is that it is the ultimate example because they are basically taking a fork in the road. And I'm not the only one who said this. You can go to Niall Ferguson or any of these Western regime academic spokespeople, and they will tell you the same thing. They may have noted it just as well as I have, just from the other perspective that this is a form of new Cold War. Anyway, my whole essay went into all that. But it's very important because it serves as the example. And meanwhile, in the West, there is this sort of unquestioned doctrine, both left and right, up and down, in a sense, because apparently this Progress Ireland, like someone like Sean Keyes is meant to be considered vaguely right-wing in some sense. I saw a debate or listened to a debate earlier on Claire Byrne with Sean Keyes and Rory Hearn, right? Talk about, Punch and Judy. Where Sean Keyes, his ideology to me is so wrong that he managed to lose lose a debate to Rory Hearn, rhetorically, and I think on the facts as well. He was trying to defend foreign investors buying up and basically, dominating the property market in Ireland. And I think he lost to Rory Hearn, who's like, thick. And they were both arguing wrong arguments at each other. Such a silly debate. I could get into that, but anyway. So what I'm saying is that in that debate, Rory Hearn was seen as the left winger and Sean Keyes the right winger or something, because right wing is defending capital, sort of, somehow, that form of right wing. But so that's that. Anyway, that's the sort of breakdown, is like this this unquestioning ideology left and right that we must grow, we must bring in lots of people to keep this whole thing going because we have low birth rates and declining birth rates, and that's what we're going to do. And if the platform of ideas, let's say whether it's Era Accelerationism or Progress Ireland or Sinn Féin or anyone else, the whole thing of like, we're going to have a dynamic discussion of the ideas and change everything, and we're going to challenge the status quo for the benefit of the people or something. This open marketplace of ideas and this discussion always proceeds from that original assumption. The original assumption is always that, well, yes, we do have a declining birth rate and we want our economy to constantly grow in a GDP sense. And because that is what gives us a good standard of living, apparently. And to do that, we'll need mass immigration ultimately, right? That's the idea. The open marketplace of ideas and the dynamic, fascinating, cool-based discussion always proceeds from that. Whereas all of the relevant discussion, the actual important discussion that needs to be had and debated, is before that. It's not after that, it's before that. The before is what we need to discuss. This assumption that we must have a constantly growing GDP, that our natural population is declining, and thus we must do it through immigration. Those two assumptions are, well, the key assumptions there are that, there's a few assumptions built into that overall statement. But to me, every one of the assumptions within that statement are up for debate. And in fact, it's crucial that they are debated. That is the debate. Everything after, if you're just assuming the debate is open and shut, all of those things are truisms. Well, to me, everything after that is just whatever. You're just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, basically, because you're not actually addressing the hard question. The hard question is, and the reason it's a hard question, of course, is because, as Sean Keyes or any of the rest of them would say, oh no, if we bring in 1 million people, we'll really bolster our economy. We'll be dynamic. We'll be agglomerated. It'll be like Manhattan. It's going to be so cool. And we'll stave off the age dependency ratio and the pension bomb and all that. The obvious answer to that is that it's a pyramid scheme. Who supports the 1 million that you came in when they get old? Another, 3 million? So big is better. It means that, I mean, there's some ridiculous arguments. I'll get into them, but it's like, that's a pyramid scheme that doesn't actually end. There's no end to that game. So the question is, should we be playing this game? And someone says, well, we've a declining population, which is unique and novel in human history. So how do you explain that? What historical reference point do we have to solve it besides just bringing in lots of Africans? I would say we don't have a historical reference point that I'm aware of, but we're rational people and we can sit down and have a debate on it, where you can have Paul Murphy, you can have Angela Nagle, you can have Keith Woods, David McWilliams. I'll even join, if I'm allowed in, people from the variety of perspectives, but crucially, you need the people who believe that the economy doesn't need to constantly grow, and they also don't believe that bringing in a load of foreigners is a good idea for human biological reasons, social reasons, and can elaborate why. That has to be obviously at least part of the conversation, to basically make the case for why it's not a good idea. If you don't have that, you're just kind of, it's like navel gazing. That's all that is. And to me, this is why I'm interested in this stuff. The whole Ponzi scheme idea is completely, can be torn apart so quickly, right? And none of it makes sense ultimately. And like I mentioned a while ago, it's almost a bit of a compliment to the people who make these arguments to say that, for me to criticize it in such a sincere fashion, because I do believe at some point or another, ultimately, because it is such a poor argument and doesn't really carry any long-term weight, you have to wonder, is it really an argument? Is it a sincere argument? Or is it a coincidence that by doing this, you inflate the wealth of sort of neo-feudal elites within our society now? You inflate their wealth and you consolidate their power by doing that, by shifting, power from a native majority and a labor class further over to a capital owning class, right? By stagnating wages and increasing house prices. And of course, it suits the landlord types, or the big landlords, big investment funds and all that too. If you say, let's build 1 million houses, let's do something like, some major wartime project, let's build 1 million houses. But then out of the other side of your mouth, you're saying, let's bring in 4 million people. It's obviously protecting the interests of those original landlords, those original investment funds or whatever. They still maintain their economic power. The value of their assets holds or increases, right, etc. And thus their social and economic, every aspect of their personal power, is held onto then. So, and that system, they would like to maintain that system. And to me, 90% of arguments advanced in the political space are sort of ultimately down the chain paid for or supported from somewhere to make those arguments. Basically, it's window dressing. It's raw, naked power interests given a sort of a veneer, given an argument that is plausibly deniable. I'm not making that argument. It's just a coincidence that it protects my interests a little bit. And that's what most politics and journalism and all NGO stuff, activism, most of it is that. Very rare to get organic voices who just say what they actually just truly believe, and that's it. There's no money changing hands. There's no promises or deals or whatever. And I'm not painting this at what I have up on screen here. This could be, I'd be more aiming this at like Sean Keyes and Progress Ireland, let's be real. And when I say that these arguments are ultimately flow from power interests or whatever, well, if you thought that I was being a bit mad to say that, well, you're sort of, you're being a bit conspiratorial there. Well, we return to the basic thing here. What am I talking about? I'm talking about Sean Keyes and Progress Ireland, who are in the main funded by a couple of billionaires. Okay, so this case study itself totally speaks to that. And what are we to believe? That they're just very benevolent? It just so happens. So let's look at John Collison here, just briefly. And I'll wrap this. I'll kind of speed through this because I don't want to go on too long here. So, when you think of a tech billionaire, right, you think of a sort of person who's just obsessed with technology, obsessed with solutions and all of this. They walk around in runners and plain, pastel colored t-shirts and the rest of it, right? And they're sort of autistic, and they don't really have an interest in money or wealth or power at all, to be honest. Their head is so in the clouds, they don't even think like that. They're not like the robber barons of old. They are beyond that. They're just interested in tinkering effectively with technology and solutions, and they're like scaling and technology and all these kind of things, my startup and all that. And they're not like the robber barons of old. Well, that's obviously not really true. That's a bit of a meme. And it's certainly not true for John Collison here. So, I hate to sink to this level, but let's be real, right? From tech titan to billionaire, look at what he adds to his 1,200 acre, 10.1 million pound Irish estate, and plans to spend another 5.3 million restoring a adjoining derelict mansion. Now, you have to stand back and kind of think about how large 1,200 acres is. But he's acquiring properties all the time, as if it appears. So this young man now has the ability to acquire toys and treasures the very, very wealthy so often acquire. And aside from recently bidding for Weston Airport near Dublin, he clearly intends to more than just dabble in real estate assets too. So, bear in mind that this guy is literally gobbling up property. I mean, I don't even know how big 1,000 acres is. I really have no idea how, like, that's a large, I don't know. Someone in the chat, give me, if you're familiar with acres. Are you good with maths? If you had 1,000 acres laid out in front of you, uninterrupted, just, flat land, flat grass. If you had 1,200 acres, and you were on one perimeter of it, and you wanted to walk to the opposite perimeter, walk across it, I'd love to know how far that would be for an average walk, let's say, average paced walk. It's kind of a good way of trying to understand how big that is. But, that's what these people are doing, right? And meanwhile, I want to mention the same guy. I'm not just doing the point and sort of sneer because he's rich or whatever, but you have so someone like the same guy, John Collison, he questioned the red tape and ecological paperwork that prevents housing energy. So he's basically like sounding off on why things don't work well, sort of vaguely. So he says stuff like, I thought this was kind of funny, because basically what I think goes on is that some of these billionaire tech guys, they might be extremely intelligent at their field. So they discovered, they're sort of high IQ, mathematical brains, good at solving technical problems, but maybe are sort of almost a little bit on the airheaded or like ignorant side when it comes to broader questions, perhaps. And not just that, but completely detached by virtue of the lifestyle that they live, that they just they're in this other planet. So they just don't see things from another perspective, which sort of follows logical sense. But Yeah, in an interview last year with Sunday Independent, he questioned the nature of the country's housing delays, which have emerged as the country's worst social and political problems in the last 5 years. Why is it so hard to build housing in Ireland? We clearly have to build a bunch more of it. Why can't we build up? He said in the interview. I think we have to do something about it. And he blah blah blah. And then he starts complaining about visas. I'll get to that in a minute. But he's talking about how visas take ages and how you can get a passport really quickly. That works really efficiently, but visas take ages. And he says, why can't it just take a week? He asks. So anyway, he has his 1,200 acres or something like that in Abbey Leaks. And he's talking about, there was a quote here about ecological stuff. I read that a while ago. Ecological red tape and all of this, right? Now, I know red tape can be a bit of an issue, and some of the environmental protection laws are a bit of nonsense, but it is kind of rich that these sort of billionaire guys are talking about, why can't we just cut the red tape? Why can't we have basically carte blanche on visas? Why can't we effectively, and I will elaborate on this more, what they do believe basically in open borders. Why can't we have open borders and just build and cut the red tape and just be very solutions based? So yeah, rampant mass immigration, unchecked basically, for their own purposes, and cut the environmental red tape. Fuck that basically. Let's just build loads of estates as far as the eye can see. And it's like, well, that's a bit rich now, because of course on his 1,200 acres there's plenty unblemished nature where there's no red tape cut of any sort, where it is probably beautiful, mature trees as far as the eye can see, etc. So it's like, you'll have your environment, you'll have your Garden of Eden, effectively. Can you imagine the money they'll spend on that? Not only will it be, is it probably large and vast, but probably has it's probably, the perimeter is probably rigged out with the most high-end security. I wouldn't be surprised if they have basement bunkers and all this. I don't know, I'm speculating, but you know how these billionaires are. So it's like, you're living in that world, and I don't think they stop to sort of question their biases, let's say. I wonder if they sit back and think, I am a multi-billionaire because I came up with a smart way of processing money or whatever. Now I find myself as a billionaire with all this power. I fly over cities and I just see ant holes, basically, where there's just the person, they look down from a jet landing in Dublin or whatever, and as they're approaching, they see all this countryside around Dublin or around Galway or whatever it is, Shannon, whatever. And they say, that's silly. Why don't they just build there or build there? Well, like, why don't we just bring in another 5 million immigrants? And like, there's loads of room. I can see next to the city, there's like loads of grass, loads of green space. You could just put them there. And it's like, well, yeah, but that wouldn't be to take into account the people who live on the ground, the ants on the street, who aren't in a 1,200 acre estate, and they're not billionaires, and they don't have private jets and all of that, that they have to live within the texture of the society, the fabric of the society, and they actually depend on it as a sort of an ecosystem. And part of that is having kinship and familiarity with what's going on around you, and having a bit of bargaining power and the rest of it. So I just want to see how big 1,200 acres is. 62 Croke Parks. 1,200 acres is 4.8 kilometers squared. Wow, that's pretty big. So that'd be like, a town, basically, a large enough town. Yeah, easily. I mean, bigger almost. Phoenix Park is 1,700 acres, so not much less than Phoenix Park. So again, that's where these guys are coming from. And you will see here now that the immigration question, right? So I was looking to see if they'd be based on immigration, because I thought they were like going to be accelerationists and all this stuff, right? Naive though I am, as I am. It's like, no, they don't sidestep immigration. They talk about the Collison brothers very clearly. So this is Patrick Collison. America's immigration systems are hurting startups, he says. It's kind of, I mean, the headline says it basically, but he says the insane, crazy benefit, the tailwind that the US has for decades and decades gained from, is the fact that we're a preeminent destination for high potential people all around the world. So US sucks in all these high IQ sort of ambitious people from around the world, and that is what makes them powerful. That's what makes them a superpower, effectively. You'll hear the same from Niall Ferguson. You'll hear the same from all of them. This is the ideology, right? And of course, to some extent, it's true. There's a point to that. So if you, let's say, if you effectively have an open border, which the US, he's complaining that the US is restrictive. I mean, I don't know what he's looking for, but it's pretty open. Like, I don't know the figures for the US, but I mean, I think it's like tens of millions of people they're bringing in like every few years. But the idea is, like, if you just had a completely seamless border where basically under one definition or another, people can ultimately just come there if they want to without really any proper restriction. Ultimately, you'll get a lot of bums on the street, you'll get a lot of farm workers, you'll get a lot of laborers, you'll have criminals, you'll have druggies, you'll have perfectly nice people living in a suburb. I don't know. You'll have a big mix. And they'll come in waves and they will associate with each other, Indian, ethnic networks and nepotism and all that. That'll all go on. But within that, of course, if you bring in 500,000 people, it's like panning for gold. Within that 500,000, there are going to be a few dozen absolute geniuses, right? Some of the world's most talented people in there, just by the law of numbers. And so then you can point to those people and say, look, this policy is going great. We got these 25 absolute geniuses who came up with this or that business or other. Isn't that wonderful? But of course, that ignores the other 495,000 plus people who you've just brought into the country. You've added this biomass to your country blindly. And that comes with consequences: political polarization, ethnic strife, potential violent conflict, just complete societal breakdown ultimately, right? You're toying with fire, like, in the long run. And they're just not accounting for that. So it's just, it's basically a utilitarian view. So someone like people like the Collisons just look at talent. They're looking around that in a room full of geniuses. And the idea that someone would have to get a visa, some like Japanese genius would have to get a visa to go to the States or something, just seems silly to him. It seems so sort of obscure and silly, petty. Just get out of my way. I mean, we're here, rulers of the world, coming up with all the ideas. We're the smart ones. And all these demagogues and politicians and populists and all these silly, misguided human ideas lead to blockages and bureaucracies that stop us. How silly, how quaint. But I just don't think they understand the rest of society outside of that room of tech people talking about scaling and startups and all this stuff. It's like, outside of that little world of yours, there's a lot more going on, and a lot of people who have their own interests. And actually, you don't run the world. You kind of do in practice, but there's no reason why your sort of narrow view from your narrow perspective and your billions should be able to sort of dictate for everyone else what happens. But of course, they don't see any of that. They just think, I'm a good guy. I'm also right. And that's human nature. I'm right. I'm a good guy. I'm informed. I don't have blind spots. And I'm a billionaire because I'm innovative. And my beliefs aren't some sort of... Basically, I'm not the supervillain. But it's kind of like, well, maybe you are actually, basically. I hate to break it to you, but you might not think you are, but you may have kind of become that if you don't know. Because you're basically stuck in this ivory tower, sort of thinking you have this God knowledge to be able to dictate how society works. And when societies vote for things like stopping immigration, you think that is just something that should be swept aside or ignored because you think you know what is good for everyone, even though you're in an ivory tower and the rest of people have to live in shitty Ohio somewhere, right? Surrounded by Mexicans and Africans, and there's total distrust and a lack of trust and reciprocity, cultural breakdown, all of this stuff happens. And it just leads to total alienation and economic oppression ultimately as well. It empowers more people like you, rich, wealthy people, capital owners, and the rest. So it's just one of those things, they just don't see it. And he just believes in this agglomeration idea. This is amazing. And that's why I go back to the China thing. It's like, actually, societies cannot just agglomerate forever based on bringing in a bunch of Africans. I'm sorry. Even if a few of them are geniuses who work for you or something like that, that doesn't justify the other 100,000 who came in for every one of those who are just this biomass in the country now. That's not going to work. It's a pyramid scheme, and it is a catastrophic social experiment as well that you have no right to play with. And you at least should demonstrate curiosity to know who are the people who argue the opposite of what I'm saying. I mean, surely if you were really that smart and that intellectual, that would be part of your mindset, where you say, I want to hear the counter argument to my point here, and I want to hear the best one. I want to hear the left-wing version, the right-wing. I want to hear and specifically, I want to hear the most banned version. What's the one that I'm not supposed to hear, that is not supposed to be advanced, the sort of downtrodden one? I want to hear that in specific, actually. Because I need a broad perspective. If I'm solutions based and all of this, I need that. So, but of course, there's not. It's just ignorance wall to wall, right? Or else it's just naked self interest with your man and his 1,200 acres and all that. Like at one point, half of Ireland will be, what's it going to be? Half of Ireland is going to be like Adamstown, right? So basically 70% Indian, 2% Irish, whatever, and paved over new builds, like ugly, horrific, nightmarish, dystopian sort of landscape, socially and physically. Half of Ireland will be like that, and it'll cost €350 for like a 2-bed or whatever that you can temporarily own. And then the other half will just be an endless expanse for the Collison brothers to just walk around and invite their friends to fly in and get in a Land Cruiser and drive around the property, up and down, and go shooting, do whatever they want to do. And it won't just be 12, it'll just be the country just divided in two. It won't be Northern Ireland, so-called, and Republic of Ireland. It will be, diverse, red tape cut concrete Ireland, diverse Indian concrete new build as far as the eye can see Ireland, and then there'll be the endless grounds of the Collison brothers and friends, and they will still be telling us how to fix everything. Right, here's how you fix everything, lads, and I've got Sean Keys here to explain it to you. And it's based, and it's like this is revolutionary. So anyway, there's a bit more on that. He's talking about agglomeration as well. He said becoming the preeminent locus of agglomeration for the world's plucky up-and-comers has been one of the US's greatest achievements and most potent advantages. Yeah, again, there's an extent to which that's true. They basically, it's compared to all these other countries, they have a lot of immigrants compared to like China. They attract the immigrants and all of this. These arguments are all sort of wrong in a lot of ways because they attract all these immigrants, but of course, China just doesn't let them in. Nor does India, really. I mean, who wants to go there? Let's be honest. But China, people might want to go to, but they just won't let you in. All the whites, even the sexpats and the language teachers and all these, hangers-on, were all effectively shoved out in the last like 5 or 10 years. They were having a great time before that. So China is pushing people out. So it's not that they just don't attract talent. That's their policy, where they're like, we don't want your talent. We have our talent. We can even afford to lose some of our talent because America's got its, door open or whatever. So naturally, some people are going to go that direction. But what can they lose? 50,000 people or whatever, talented people? Well, there's 1.5 billion of them, and they're doing just fine. Their electric car industry is the biggest in the world now, or just their car industry, full stop. They build, I think, the equivalent of a Royal Navy every year or every 4 years or something like that. They're corking out a Navy. We all know the Rise of China story. They're doing just fine. They built the Shanghai in something like less than 20 years. I've forgotten the timeline. It could be 10 years. Some very short period of time. They went from Shanghai having no metro system at all to having the largest, most affordable and sophisticated one in the world They did that in some very short period of time. And guess what? Throughout all that time, virtually no immigration into China. The world's lowest levels, full stop, bar none. And they did that. And they did that while their fertility rate was in decline. They just still did it because they have a lot of human capital. They still have a lot of bodies around the place, a lot of people with 150 IQ, a lot of whatever. They have it. They don't need to bring in millions of people to pan for gold and get a few geniuses out of there, whatever. They can. They have plenty of people who can innovate, and the proof of the pudding is in the eating. They can do it. They have the capital, the human capital, and they're not engaging because they're actual technocrats, actual engineers run their government, right? Because they're actual technocrats, they study social phenomena, they study history, they study the obvious that, Plato could have told you this. If you let in a bunch of people who have no loyalty to your state or your project, and you create this sort of Bosnia situation, it's just not good. It's not good for technology. It's not good for productivity. It's not good socially. It's not good in any way. If they were actually learned and knowledgeable, like Chinese technocrats are. Chinese technocrats study industry. They study technology, how to support R&D. They also study something like maybe bringing in 5 billion Africans is a pyramid scheme, and it's totally retarded, basically. Yeah, you don't actually have to be that smart, but the Chinese are smart enough to go, I think that's one we'll dodge. I think we'll go down the road of a declining population and we'll sort of figure it out. So that way, but let's not do option B. Let's leave that to America and the West. They can do that. By all means, we'll watch that play out from afar and popcorn at the ready. That's what actual technocrats do. They actually include the human, national, and historical element because that's, of course, crucially important. So it's just this narrow view of because US basically holds its door open to the whole world and offers them trinkets and sort of, I don't know, whatever it is, the modern version of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, or unbridled, basically, you could say the American dream or whatever. You can get rich and do what you want or whatever, and there's no rules except don't be racist. Or whatever, or anti-Semitic or anything else. But so yeah, that's his view. This kind of narrow-minded view, I just think it's silly. And here he has Sean Keyes elaborating on the whole thing. So I don't know. I don't want to bore you to death. I'll read just this one. That's actually it. Then I think it's done. Then yeah, I just want to read this one from Sean Keyes. I just think, and maybe react and criticize to it. It's a good article. I don't think it's actually good, but he's a reasonably intelligent person who can write clearly and sort of make an argument. It's just wrong. So I will go through it now. I might just read the whole thing. I'll skip along. So he talks about the demographic problems. He says the problem is Ireland's demographics. By 2050, the ratio of retired people to workers. We've all heard this a million times. Again, sorry, just to immediately interrupt him. Whether it's air accelerationism, buildocracy, or whether it's Rethink Ireland, or what's it called even? I've forgotten. Progress Ireland. It's why even bother? You're basically, what you're sort of doing is, it's just like any random technocratic fucking paper. What are they called? Not IBEC, the other one. I mentioned them a while ago. Sorry, too many acronyms. Just a random, bland technocratic thing that just trots out the most regurgitated regime party line dogmas and just serves it up on a platter for you. We get that all the time, and it's sort of grey and boring and staid and stodgy. And then it's we come along with this. Here's a bunch of young lads. They're smart. They're solutions based. They use memes or something like that. But you start reading through it and you go, wait a second, am I going crazy here or what? Because it looks like it's just the same, basically. I don't know where the novelty is. It's just the same stuff. So what's he going to say? The demographics are declining. We need to bring in a load of immigrants to keep the economy going forever. Trust me, there'll be no problems. It's a great idea. Let's not debate the fundamentals of it. End of story. I am in the inner party. Anyone who disagrees with me is in the outer party. I am very smart, you know. But it's just the same thing. It's just like that's just what Micheál Martin would say. Like, I don't know, what am I missing here? So anyway, by 2050, the ratio of retired people to workers will be more than double what it is today. This means higher taxes and lower standard of living for workers. Blah, blah, blah. That has negative consequences. And then the solution is to form a sovereign wealth fund that can, so we form the sovereign wealth fund now, and that'll just sort of pillage money out of people across the world. I don't know, buy properties in Africa and rent them back to them or something like that. Who knows? Much like the Norwegian wealth fund, we'll invest in probably property somewhere, which is what they do in our country. Farm some other country for rent. I don't know. But we'll do a sovereign wealth fund, and he's like, oh, that's kind of a good idea, but I don't think that really will cover it. We also need to do some other fundamental changes, something like that. And he says, people, the alternative to salting away money today to partially defray the cost of an aging society is to bring in more young people so that we don't have an aging society. So he goes, the two sources of young people are babies and immigration. Our fertility numbers are high by European standards, but trending down sharply. True, crashing, right? So he says, I suspect, blah, blah. He says, the other source, and this is the crux of it, the other source of young people is immigration. Oh my God, you're blowing my mind here. I've never read this 5 billion times on the Irish Times or the Journal or whatever. The other source of young people is, and of course, always unchallenged, right? The funny thing is that whether it's radical, brand new thinking, Progress Ireland, or whether it's Micheál Martin's nephew or whatever, it's always the same. We'll advance this argument safe from a bunker, effectively, where it can't be criticized. If you criticize it, you're far right, right? And you're not welcome at the event, type of thing. You're not welcome at the party. It's like, okay, well, keep going with your dumb idea, I suppose, among yourselves, and the Collisons will be there to pay your bills for you. Okay, but don't try to act like it's novel or inspired or even can logically solve any problem whatsoever. Let's be real, okay? So immigration takes a couple of forms, a certain amount of blah, blah, blah. He says there's asylum, there's this, that, and the other. Then there's economic migration. This amounts to issuing visas to immigrants that meet certain criteria. Ireland offers a small amount of these visas at the moment. I'm pretty sure it's like not a small amount, right? I don't have the number to hand. It's a lot, last time I checked. Small amount to high-skilled workers. No, we offer them to people who are pretending to study English. We offer them to people who work in, flipping burgers or this, that, or the other, running scams, all sorts of stuff, right? The idea that it's, oh no, we just bring in a couple of hundred of these really high skill genius people, and I wouldn't be against that myself at all. But that's not how it is. Anyway, so let's get to the crux of this lad's sort of argument. Okay, where do you see do the advocating for the immigrant? Oh yeah, so if the purpose of this policy is the government, let's copy Canada and Australia. He says inviting talent. At some point, I think he said wants to bring 1 million people in by 2050, which I think we've done. I don't know how old this article is, but we've done nearly that in the last 5 years, right? Never mind until 2050. Immigrants pay taxes. He makes some dodgy arguments here that are easily sort of questioned. Excuse me. Economic immigrants can pay more taxes sooner than humanitarian or other immigrants. So economic migrants pay more taxes, apparently. And the second generation of immigrants are also significant net taxpayers. He notes that immigrants pay quite a bit more tax on average than native people, but then notes, oh, well, of course, this is because they're all like on average 30 years old, whereas the native population is made up of babies, old people, all sorts of people, other stay-at-home parents and all this kind of stuff. That's kind of an important detail, actually. Yeah, you're bringing in a bunch of working age people, like some sort of coal you would throw in a furnace on an old train, like some sort of like almost liquid form resource that you just chuck into a stove. And you're treating hundreds of thousands and millions of people like that, and saying, yes, we'll get 30-year-old on average people and they'll all filter in and be good taxpayers and economically dynamic or whatever. Unlike the native population, who, you know, they've these strange features like have children and get old, and yeah, that's kind of important. That society, you can't have a society like that. You can't have a society, a normal base society, and then chuck on this army of worker tax units, and not expect them to all grow old and have competing interests with the natives, and even when subsequent people have competing interests with them. It's just such a bizarre idea that you run a society like that. It defies any sort of common sense logic. And even the facts about that, like they pay more taxes, yes, because the age is skewed. And of course, he's talking about economic migrants exclusively there. That doesn't take into account how many hundreds of thousands of so-called asylum seekers have we taken? I mean, he doesn't mention that he opposes that. So again, it's all these sort of little category tricks to justify it. It doesn't take into account they might pay more tax, but they create an inflationary pressure, so it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter what they do. They might create more tax to build some more hospitals, but for every 10 hospitals that were built because of their economic dynamism, a demand was created for 15 hospitals, type of thing, right? And thus why we have such issues at the moment. Proof of the pudding is in the eating. It's not just about inefficient spending of money. It's a fundamental problem. You can't just bring in lots of people and they create demand, they create inflationary pressure. You bring in immigrants to solve the housing crisis, they all need houses. You bring them in to do this, it creates more. You bring them in to bolster the healthcare service. Well, now you've brought in hundreds of thousands of people who, many more of whom are patients of hospitals than will ever work in hospitals, even as a ratio of each other, obviously, right? But he's ignoring all this stuff and sort of focusing on these isolated facts. Well, technically, the tax base will raise. Well, yeah, obviously it will. Like, yeah, you know, you've blown my mind. Adding 1 million workers over 30 years would necessitate a lot of investment, starting with housing. About 15,000 extra homes per year would need to be built to accommodate them, plus transport, hospitals, and everything else. Look, let's be real, it's not going to happen, right? Even if it did happen, it wouldn't be enough, because without proper controls on immigration, every increment to which you lower prices of housing and increase the ease and standard of living in Ireland, that basically it creates a greater pull factor from the rest of the world, which is an infinite pool of 8 billion odd people who might come here. So you have the housing prices in Ireland, twice as many people will naturally want to come live here, right? And thus you return to square one without controls. So even if you did your sort of magic project where you magicked up so many houses and so many hospitals, well, it would just end up negating itself in the absence of immigration control. Limits to growth, limits to retreating from growth, basically stepping back from it a little bit. Anyway, so that's that. Talks about how Ireland isn't that densely populated and how we could be more densely populated. Again, looking at the square kilometerage of the country, what a ignorant way of looking at, you know, the broader human context, social context, everything else. Just looking, I mean, it's actually the ultimate, because you see so many of them do it, the liberals and stuff, and also these like cool based reformists or whatever, like Keys. You'll see them all do it. Ireland is full, it doesn't look like it or whatever. What could be more ignorant than taking a square kilometer to population reading of a country and thinking that that is the be all and end all or something, or some sort of answer? That is bizarre. And what a intelligent, I don't mean that as an insult, but like really unintelligent, like uneducated in a sense, way of looking at it. It would be like saying, going to the Kalahari Desert to the tribes people who live there, you know, and like bringing in, you know, 500,000 Japanese people or whatever to live on top of them and use like where they live or whatever, where their oasis is, where they go for drink water or whatever. Bringing in a bunch of Japanese people and creating this whole bizarre social infrastructure, hate speech and censorship and all this to justify it. This bizarre social experiment and driving the Kalaharians out of business. They can't afford anything where they live anymore. And then saying this desert is massive. Look at the square. Look at how many people we have per square kilometer. What are you talking about? It's just it's silly. It's such a silly and ignorant way of, and clearly just all of this is just complete nonsense to justify the naked interests of someone like John Collison and his 1,200-acre estate. In my view, I'm not trying to impugn his motives. I don't know what goes on in Sean Keyes's mind, what his motivations are, but to me, that's what these sort of arguments smack of, because they're all so fragile, paper thin, hollow. Every little argument that's made is so easily sort of refuted, and so obviously refuted. But anyway, Ireland needs to invest more ambitiously. Yeah, he keeps referencing Canada. Now, Canada has a huge property crisis and is basically post-national now, and not great. I have a whole ramble on Canada, what Canada could have been. Can you imagine if you've time traveled back in Canada to 1970? I'll give you the short version of this argument, right? Can you imagine you time travel back to 1970 in Canada, right? This beautiful country, vast resources galore, and you effectively say, we're putting a dictator in charge of Canada with absolute power, absolute, complete, unquestioned power. And then that dictator relinquishes his power. This is a long way of saying it, but he almost entirely relinquishes his power back to the average Western government, sort of, just like Ireland or Australia or the US or whatever. He says, I'm going to wash my hands of this whole thing, go back to that. But the one thing I will do, I'm just going to basically outsource it to any average liberal Western government. But the one thing I will use my absolute power to stick to, only one term, is that there will be no immigration. If someone marries someone abroad or whatever, they can bring their Italian wife home, and obviously. But in terms of sort of any significant numbers being brought in for work or this or that or the other, or anything other than interpersonal sort of very minor negligible immigration, there will be no immigration. That's going to be our sort of quirky policy that we're just going to do out of step with the rest of the West. Please leave us to it. That's it. I mean, Canada would look amazing now. I'm very sure with all the resources they have, they would have been fine. They would have had to cross certain demographic bridges and all sorts of stuff. That would have been fine. It would fall into place, right? Obviously, that's how societies work. They sort of conform to the needs a little bit internally among themselves. Canada would be like a utopia now compared to what it is. This sort of strange post-national country where like you can't buy a house in any of the cities for love nor money, basically. Just play out in your mind with the human capital and the geographic capital that Canada had. If they just said, yeah, basically our society will continue on, whatever kids we have, many or few, it'll be our country here and we'll just administer it among ourselves. What would their society look? It would be absolutely epic, right? Same goes for Australia. I'd say it'd be like a utopia sort of version of a Western country that we could scarcely even imagine now, to be honest. It would have all the bells and whistles that we have now, but, life much more livable and stable, and the culture totally flourishing, people not locking their doors, all the rest of it, right? You would have all the abundance, the technology, the social trust and reciprocity, the stability, everything. You'd have all that. And this inexorable question of what do we do about demographics if we don't bring in 5 million Africans? They would have basically just crossed that bridge and kind of figured it out. But unfortunately, we don't have that case study because every Western country has had it done to it now. That's why China is interesting. So anyway, yeah, I think that's that's kind of his thing. It's just basically like a boilerplate. Let's bring in 5 million Africans or whatever. That's just that sort of basic idea, right? As like tax demand units, I think is one point he exact phrase I think he might have used at some point. I think he said little demand engines, I think is something he might have said. Anyway, yeah, that's the whole thing. I just, I mean, maybe to you, it's like, why are you focusing on this at all? But again, it's because it sort of leaks into my world a little bit. Dissident nationalism and stuff. There's, by a couple of degrees of separation, there are little links here and there that I'm aware of. Nothing formal, nothing tangible, but just little, by degrees of separation, there's a little bit of shoulder rubbing going on there. And I just want personally absolutely nothing ever to do with this kind of stuff, nor them me, I'm sure. But I would hate to see if elements of this, like rehashing, warmed over version of whatever Micheál Martin basically believes or is told to believe, warmed over with memes and a Wojak and like internet words or something as some sort of parlor trick to like. It's like, look, if you're just like advancing, what Johnny Ronan and Micheál Martin and Neil Richmond and some Christine Lagarde, or if you're just rehashing what they believe, just do that by all means, but don't borrow nationalist right wing energy, because of course that's an asset. It's an aesthetic, because everybody knows when you're talking about a radical conversation, bringing the new ideas in and challenging the sort of gerontocracy, the ideological gerontocracy, and the stagnation within the West that we all see around us in housing and everything else, the fact that everything is just in this decline and pressure, and we want to bring in the new voices. I think subconsciously everyone knows that, well, the real voices that need to come in from the cold, to actually have a relevant, exciting thing to say about, well, how would we, or at least to be part of the conversation of what are the essential things that we have to say, we have to just say, that are integral to like fixing the obvious problems that we all recognize: housing, this, that, and the other. The problems are the things that these people are assuming we're meant to take for granted. The argument proceeds, like I said, the shite that they're going on about. All the assumptions are those assumptions are the debate, and what they're doing is just blowing past that and acting like these novel voices are coming on the scene to try to fix the problems. I don't know. Meanwhile, the lads are going around with their 52 million acre estates and all of this. It's just, it's like something out of the Hunger Games, basically, and it's ridiculous. And I prefer just people who are actually making interesting arguments, just for themselves. So anyway, there's I just want to look at some chats here. So Last True Gale again, the favorite. I just want to pull it, no disrespect if anyone's super chatted there. Just I just want to. He says, like, there is a point, there is a plan, Ireland 2040. I agree, but at some point there's a stratification. Yeah, okay, you're probably just chatting among yourselves there, basically. But he also says, I wanted to do it's like a 1-to-1. We need to just do a stream, Last True Gale. I'm just calling you out now. I want to do my own stream on this. That the upper middle class have no clue what is going on genuinely, and that has major impacts on other people. Yeah, it could be boomers, it could be billionaires. There's a huge difference there. Your average, comfortable boomer versus a billionaire, but it's the same principle in my view. To be honest, what I've always said, when it comes to someone who's like the likes of Sean Keyes or whatever, and when he was talking to Peter Ryan, he said he was like sneering at the idea of Ireland used to be rich in spirit, but we were very poor. It's like a choice between, you bring in 1 million immigrants and have this, pursue this immigration thing, that this religion that they all sort of believe in, of infinite growth based on piles of bodies, effectively. It's either that or Angela's ashes. So that's one dichotomy, completely unintelligent, really ignorant thing to kind of put out there, effectively. Because it was like that 100 years ago, and then we changed a few things, correlation, causation. It's like, well, no, we could have not done any immigration since the year 2000 and brought in some foreign investment and our demographics could have declined, and we could have done various things, and perhaps the growth wouldn't be so much, but access to resources like housing would be more readily available, stuff like that. Like a lot of things could have been, there's a lot of counterfactuals you could have where, well, yeah, you know, like, oh, we sort of became a globalized EU sort of open economy, great little country to do business. We did all that, and then we got prosperous, and we got things like big roads, like motorways. But of course, I've argued before that if you look at countries as diverse and closed off as Eritrea, Myanmar, and others, you will see that in the period from about 50, 60 years ago to now, they have built huge highways and the likes, right? And lots of other countries. China, another one that didn't do mass immigration. They did globalization, but they didn't do the immigration aspect of it. There are loads of examples where countries, just because of the nature of modernity, machinery, just you know, spreading of ideas, and the rest of it, the basic concept of the motorway, the interstate in America and the autobahn in Germany, they were only built in the, like, not long before the mid 20th century. The literal existence of these types of roads only was invented a few decades before they came to Ireland. Naturally, it takes a while to get out to Ireland, sort of, but there's no reason why, just because they have an EU sign plastered all over them, just gentle reminder for us, there's no reason why, had we not been so much a part of all that, that maybe our own national government would have been just also built the roads, right? It's just one of these sort of correlation causation things, makes no sense. And then they're talking about people per square kilometer, and totally dumb arguments. Like, it actually makes me angry. Not angry, but like, I find it just disappointing in a sense. Like, these are meant to be intelligent people, and this is what you're hearing from them. But I don't know. Yeah, maybe I should just stop talking about it now. You know, it's just it's like it's like being surrounded by wrong arguments all the time. And then someone like Rory Hearn, who would take a different, more humane vision than the likes of Sean Keyes, let's say, or whatever. Oh, let's challenge the investment funds and all of that. But his solutions, his book gaffes or whatever, if you say to him, what about if we're bringing like 200,000 people in to the country? Like, what's that going to do to your model of how many houses we can build and all that? Like, supply demand, basic economics, refuses to talk about it, just has a firewall up against that, and says anybody who says we should have any restrictions on immigration is a racist hater, and we should be lovely, we should be nice teddy bears. You're just going, can we just be intelligent here? Like, is it that hard to just say, can we just, like, you know about supply and demand, surely? Or even a question for Rory Hearn. Okay, say you're in favor of immigration to a point. You don't think that's the be all and end all of solving the immigration crisis or the housing crisis. You don't think demand is that important. I do. Fine. Well, a basic question then is, at what point would the immigration be too much that whatever housing situation or supply side solution you have, it would just be too much? Now, your number could be 40,000. It could be 500,000. I'll give you a wide range. You know, you can say it's 50 million if you want to annually, which is ridiculous, but you can say that if you want to. You have a carte blanche. Give me a number. That doesn't make you racist or me racist for asking it or whatever. It's just a crucial aspect to what you're talking about. The number of people who come in here, surely, right? No, there's this. It's off limits. It's totally verboten. You can't question that, according to Rory Hearn, who has some good ideas on one side, but he can't state the obvious. And then Sean Keyes on the other side has some good ideas. Oh, let's attract some international investment, and let's rejig, try to get some national banking credit going and all this kind of stuff. But you're ignoring the fact that, like, you're not even ignoring it. You're advocating for us to bring in a fuck ton squared of immigrants, no regard to any other aspect of it. So how are prices really going to come down? And it's just not possible. It's not doable. It's not going to happen. Nobody's mentioning the obvious. And it's so frustrating to just say, I actually think, Rory Hearn, you've got some good ideas. They're interesting. I think, Sean Keyes, you've got some good ideas. I don't expect you guys to advocate for, 23andMe's at the border and mass deportations now and this kind of stuff. I'm not requiring some sort of extremist nationalism out of you. I'm just requiring a bit of common sense back, right? That, yeah, no, Ireland is against bringing in all these immigrants. That's the other thing Sean Keyes doesn't mention. 70% of Irish people and rising are just against this. So what are you talking about? You're saying that you're coming to the table with solutions. Ostensibly solutions for the country, which means solutions for the people in the country. Well, like the majority of people patently, openly state that they emphatically reject the key aspect of your solution, i.e., bringing in 1 million people. So, who do you think you're speaking for? Why are you speaking? Is it just some master plan between you and Patrick Collison? Or do you have any regard for the it sounds like a trite phrase, the will of the people, but the literal will of the people, the statistically documented will of the people is completely 100 miles in the other direction of what you're talking about. It's all so frustrating, is all I'm trying to say there. That's what I find with this stuff. I want to engage with the mainstream. I want to riff with it. I'd even like to debate them or talk to them or something, but it's like, it's all fucking fake, that's the thing. It's all just totally fake. That's my view. Anyway, God bless Progress Ireland and the rest of them. That's me talking about that for a long time. I just wanted to kind of ramble on it. So it's just one super chat here. Armchair Limerick Nationalist, super sticker, no comment 5. Thank you very much. Armchair Limerick Nationalist. And I will I'll leave it there, Oh, interesting comment actually. Horizontal materialist. I'll have to look that one up. Yeah, it's something that maybe I need to, because streams are kind of like late night and rambling, and I'm just kind of going off and all this, and just kind of making it up as I go along, in a sense, putting my thoughts together. I might write something on. See, it's already been done, and it's so obviously wrong. It's like I want to write a crystallized, coherent thing on it, maybe to refute it, but it's like, well, what am I even refuting? I poked the holes in his arguments there already, like the false assumptions and the jumps from correlation to causation and all of this kind of stuff. Like, it's not worth refuting. I just wish there was an argument to refute. I wish the David McWilliams, which is what this is basically, just more David McWilliams. I wish there was more to that. I wish that was a real conundrum that I, as a nationalist, had to unscramble. I had to apply. I don't consider myself some boffin, but I had to apply my mind to try to reconcile an answer, or at least meet it halfway if it turns out that it's right. These people have got a good point. You know what? I have to adjust where I'm at to be kind of half right, but then I can be more right than them. I want to engage in that sort of the cut and thrust of it. And because at the end of the day, for all my fanciful notions, they've got such a good point across the board in their overall argument that I have to figure out a way of synthesizing it or whatever. If my own ideas are to stand up at all, I would like there to be that friction. And it's just, there's not. It's just, we all know what the truth is. And they're all sort of, this thing is beyond refutation. It basically would be, what I'm trying to say is that if I wrote an article to respond to Sean Keyes's various points he's making here, and same with Collison, and I don't mean to sound like a snob, I would just find it a boring article to write. Basically, it's just boring. It's boring to read, but it would even be boring to refute, because it's like, okay, these are sort of obvious things. I don't know. So, okay, lads, I'm going to go to bed, basically. So you should too. Thanks everybody for watching. As always, I'll be back again before long with the next little few thoughts. Maybe there'll be some exciting events happen. Surely every 2 or 3 days in Ireland is something pretty fascinating going on. So Anyway, I'll be back before long. Take care of yourselves. Ihawa. See ya.